Buddy bought a 1980s Honda Interceptor 500 and it came with a carburetor in a box. Just miscellaneous parts rolling around. This is what it all came with, everything besides Action Mark Martin here. So I've got them laid out. Got one, two, three, four. That's the way the carburetors are situated on the bike. Actually, I've got one to show you. So we're talking 1, 2, 3, 4. And I like labeling everything because it's really easy to get these things mixed up. You don't want to be mixing parts up because every one of these carburetors is different. So I actually use one of these organizers. Everything that goes in here is 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. I'm going to be using the ultrasonic bath. I separate everything into 1, 2, 3, and 4. Make sure it's all apart. So I think I've actually got everything to do this. I was looking for sink screws. There should be 3 sink screws. I've got 2, but there's another one here. I've got the 2 thrust springs. Those are a big worry of mine. Don't know why there's only 5 plenum bolts, but then there's some other miscellaneous ones with the same thread size, so I assume they probably just put them on with the wrong ones. That's all right because we're going to be replacing all of the rubber, all these plenum seals and everything, all the rubber and all the bolts with rubber kit and stainless steel kit from Billy's Outback. That's what I did on the other one, and it's worth it to do it. And if you ought to just send your carburetor into them and have them do it, it'd be $295. And I saw some pictures of how it looks, and it's awesome. So I think from playing with these that all the slides and more importantly the diaphragms inside are going to be okay, but these are pretty crunchy. But this is the worst one. Afraid to pull that one off. We've got the 2 vent tubes here. We've got the Z pipe. This is what I think is the weakest part of this entire carburetor. This is Z pipe fuel line, and then the S pipe fuel lines. So we have all of those as well. Choke linkage, choke linkage, choke linkage. There should be 3. Missing most of the washers, that's okay because we're going to be replacing them all. I'm going to pull off these covers, put them, it's back there. I've got a bucket of evapor rust, see how much of that rust I could take off. And then I'm going to start splitting these carburetors apart and putting them into the ultrasonic cleaner. So I just filled it with warm water. I picked this one up on Amazon for about $240. It's pretty awesome so far. It's loud as shit. You wouldn't expect it. Well, I guess maybe you would expect it, but it is loud. I brought these out to show you what not to do. Don't use purple power and don't use simple green. I've already made this mistake once. Luckily, I don't think it cost me too much because I had it pretty diluted. These will attack aluminum given enough time, and it just gets catalyzed by using it inside of an ultrasonic cleaner. Instead, simple green extreme, this one here, says as long as it's under a 1 to 13, so 1 to 13 or 1 to 50 or anything above 1 to 13 will be safe for use on aluminum. So I figure there's about 13 liters in here so far. I'm going to be putting 500 milliliters of this inside of there. It gives me like a 26:1 dilution ratio. You could actually just run it with water. You could run it just with dish soap and it's going to work pretty good. But I just got this in the mail and I wanted to give it a shot. I always like to put warm water in this instead of letting this unit heat itself up because I don't know anything about the longevity of this unit. So if I don't have to run the heaters as long, that's better for me. So heated it up. I'll put the 500 milliliters. Actually, we can just go ahead and do that right now. Throw it in there. We got our solution. When you turn it on, you'll hear how loud it is. I chose this unit over the 10 liter because the 10 liter was $200 and it had 4 transducers for 240 watts. This was 360 watt and with the 6 transducers for $40 more and 5 liters of more capacity. This is the size I would want. You could even go bigger, but this is a pretty good deal, I think, at $240. All right, so I'm gonna start pulling this thing apart. I think the first thing I'm gonna do is grab my JIS screwdriver and pull the diaphragms and the needles and the springs out and pray that we don't need new diaphragms because that's one thing I don't have. So what do we think is going to be behind carb number 1? All right. I think we might be okay here. Did they use some gasket sealer? Is that glue? They glued it on a bit. I think we're going to be okay here. This one looks all right. Oh yeah, if the rest come out like this, then we'll be okay. Putting all the carb 1 stuff into there. To be thorough on going through the rest of this, there's the cover, then this spring will sit here, then the needle sits in the bottom and it's held in. You only need to turn this about, I think, 60 degrees. and this plastic piece that holds in the needle will pop out. So there's our needle, spring there, that sits on top of the needle, gives it pressure, and that's everything, pulling that out. Very happy to see that all the diaphragms are in pretty good shape. This is the one slide that was having some trouble moving up and down, but I can see there's some filth inside of there. But the diaphragms themselves are good, so we're not going to need new ones. What I'm doing is getting all of the rubber pieces off of the carburetor bodies so that we could put the bodies into the ultrasonic bath. So there's two more things. Need to open the float bowl up, but before we do that, I'm taking these choke mechanisms off, and there's something interesting about this one. So the choke here, when you open it, will open that passage. However, this one's stuck. So even if this was moving, this choke would just stay open. So if this was still on the bike, this bike would stay choked. So that's got to be fixed and cleaned out. So I'll take a 7, pull that nut off. Okay, washer with it, and this piece, this bracket that connects to the linkage. All right, that's gonna, what are you? Number 1. Okay, now we're gonna take this plastic jacket off, and you can pull it backwards like so. And now, kind of get a feel for how to do this. Sometimes I get lucky and it pops right off. There it is. So there's a spring and then the lever. Lastly, we need a 14 millimeter. This should not be that tight. This is plastic. Shouldn't take much. Unscrew that, and the plunger should come out with it. There it is. There's a spring inside of there. This will actually come off over the top. There's the spring, there's the plunger. That plunger was the piece that was sitting right in there. So now we've got the choke off on this one. I'm going to take the choke off the rest of them, and then we're going to get to the float bowl. And now it's time to take off the float bowl and all the jetting and everything inside of it. If you don't have one of these JIS screwdrivers, I highly recommend it. If these are rounded off and you're unable to do it, stop before you make them worse. Get one of these. If you still can't get it, this is your answer. I've had to do this before a lot. I loosened all these, and they were tough, but I got them out with the screwdriver. Okay. Let's see what we got. Ooh, this one is hardened on there. Why is... Ooh, this will be fun. The other one popped right off. This one's sealed. It's just a gasket. I gotta give this one some thought. Now that is something I have not seen before. Not being able to get the float bowl off. Let's see if I can get some penetrating fluid in there. Try another one, see if they're all glued on. That one's basically glued. I hope somebody didn't go through and just glue all the float bowls on. That would be a real mistake. Let's see if this one will come off. Good. Did somebody glue the float bowls on? Are you shitting me? I just don't even know what to say. Now, there is some more stuff we can get off of here. We can take the air fuel mixture screw out. There it is. So we can get that guy out, and then you could theoretically pull these butterfly shafts off. Unless you have a very good reason to, I would not. I simply wouldn't. I think you can screw up more than you can gain by doing so, and I don't think you gain too much by pulling this off. So I'm leaving the throttle valves on. I need to pull those pilot mixture screws out. And I need to figure out why somebody welded the float bowl onto the carburetor body. But continuing on, we need to take the air fuel mixture screw out of here. And what that looks like, it's in here. You'll get it out with a small screwdriver, and I can only find my crappy one because I was using the other one earlier and I can't find it. But it's going to have a small rubber gasket. This is the hardest piece to get out. There's a washer, and on this one it's actually corroded onto there. Then a spring, and then the actual air fuel mixture screw itself. So we'll get in there. If the carburetor ran well beforehand and you want to note where these are, turn them in until it stops. So count them. This one, wow, this one is, oh boy. I gotta find my good screwdriver. That one's stuck. Let's try another one so I can show you, and then I gotta figure that one instead. This should turn pretty easily. Okay, so I'm gonna find out where these were set. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 halves, so they are 2.5 turns out, and I think stock is 2. All right, so now I can pull it out. So write those down if it was running well. If you have a modified exhaust, or you change the intake or the fueling on it, or you went up in jets or anything, you'll probably end up playing with these a bit, or it's just going to depend on what your altitude is as well. So once this is loose, I should be able to dump this one out. Which carb do I have here? 2. All right, so what came out on there? The air fuel mixture screw and the spring, which means the washer and the gasket are still inside. Now, these things are always real tough to fish out, and you can do it with a pick, sometimes with a straight, sometimes with a 35. If you are replacing them, and you can damage them, I found you can thread, I've been told, you can thread a deck screw in. And sometimes you can catch them. And I've done it on 2 of them already. Be nice on camera. There, okay, washer's out. Now, the trickiest bit. I'm not pushing in hard, I'm just trying to get lucky with pulling it out. As I turn the camera off, I got it. Okay, so that's there. Pull off the float drain screw here. So I'll pull this thing out. And especially why I want to pull these things out. Ooh, look at that guy. That needs to be cleaned up. I have been doing some research in between this, and this isn't going to be so easy for me to break off. One suggestion I saw was to soak them in carb cleaner overnight, and maybe it'll loosen it up. Another was to take a screwdriver and lightly tap here, but I'm afraid of messing up those mating surfaces. So there is a gasket between the float bowl and the body. What I think I'm going to do, and why I wanted to take that drain bowl screw out, is I think I'm going to put these into the ultrasonic and see if that helps loosen this up so that I can pull these bowls off. Bowls should just come right off. There shouldn't be anything adhering it to here. So I am ready to put these in the bath. I'm not taking the throttle valves off because I don't think there's much benefit to doing so. I'm going to proceed forward and put these in the drink, and hope I can loosen up those float bowls. So let's get this bad boy going. Alright, I'll keep them in the order because my Sharpie is going to get washed away from this. Make sure that gets submerged because I want that. Put the drain screw up. There we go. Let them fill up. And I'm keeping them in the order, the orientation on the bike, so I know which one is which. Okay, so now, heat. Got it on. Alright, it's at 44C now. I just got it set to 50. It goes up to 60. I don't want to go up that high because I don't really need to, I've found. And I don't want to stress it more than it needs to. On this, I'm going to put him in for 25 minutes to really try to break them apart. And now you'll hear how loud it is. Looks like dinner is ready. Mark is beckoning. Let's see how it did. Got some murky old water, like expected. Ooh. That looks better. Sharpie. Okay. So, yeah, I'll blow them out, and then we'll get the bowls off, and then I'll go through the internals on the jets and everything inside of it. Well, I got carb bowl number 1 off, and it didn't come off without a fight. I was still unable to knock it, but I tried something, and it worked. I'm going to try it on carb number 2 here. You can see that somebody used some kind of sealer around this, some type of glue that's making this a whole lot harder. Ooh, that gasket's gone. Anyway, on this carburetor, there's this little indent here near the outlet. there's no other good spot for it right there, and you can get a nice flat spot. What I did is put a razor blade in here and tried to drive it in. There we go. So that works to remove the bowls. All right, now that we've broken in, we can actually see what we're working with. So we've got our float here. There's a float valve there, float seat, main jet, emulsion tube, pilot jet. Those all need to come out. First thing I'm going to do is move this pin. Sometimes they don't slide out so easy, which is why I put electrical tape around some pliers so I can pull it out. I should be able to pull this pin out. This will allow the float to come out, and this has these plastic pieces. I can take the float valve out. This one looks barely used. That looks pretty nice, and it had a lot of springiness still in it. Then if I take my number 10 nut driver, I can pull out the seat. Wow, that one's in there. Ooh. And the seat is going to have a little fuel filter on it. So if you're not getting fuel or something's going on, it could be that. Somebody replaced these recently. Now we're going to go to the main jet, which is here. And it looks like you should use a smaller screwdriver like this. But I find the biggest one, well, that will fit. So there's no rocking around inside of there. If I put this one in, you can see it rocks a bit. A lot of times you find these things are chipped. So I like to get it as close to possible so I don't chip one of them. I should have, what is this? Is this carb 4? What size are you? This is a 102. Okay, so the 4 and the 2 are 102s, and the other ones will be 106s is my guess. Okay, so that's out. 7 millimeter. We could pull out our emulsion tube. This one has some tiny, tiny little holes on it. That one looks tiny, tiny little holes. I'll use fishing line later to fish through those, but these are going to take a bath. And then lastly, we have, I just grabbed the wrong screwdriver, our pilot, and this should be a 38. So if you're changing the jetting, you're just changing these jets. There's the pilot. Tiny little holes on the pilot. Where does it say 38? It says 38 on here somewhere. There it is. Barely visible. It is a 38. Okay, so now we should have these ready to go, hopefully. All right, it's the next day, and I was getting some stuff set up, doing some final cleaning before reassembly, and I'm now noticing the extent of damage that the previous owner has done to this carburetor. I mentioned the gluing on of the float bowls. That sucked. Been using a razor blade and then 2000 grit sandpaper to try to take as much of it off as possible and make these as flat as possible. And obviously you see I can't get all of the sealant out, but I feel comfortable enough that the surface is going to be fine once I get the gasket in on both the bowl and the carb body. So that is what it is. Next thing I noticed, all of these little guys were really rough coming out, and one of them was just all knackered up on the outside, like there was no getting it out. So somebody must have noticed it was stuck, tried to pull it out with the pliers without a soft edge on it, and just knackered up the end of it. If you're struggling to pull this or put this thing back in, if you're trying to pull it out, put electrical tape around or something to just soften it and pull it out. I like to lubricate stuff inside of the carburetor with Marvel Mystery Oil because it's a fuel additive. It's okay if it gets in there, and it's a little bit of lubrication. If you're struggling to get this back in, which I could not get anything into here, I like to use 3000 grit sandpaper. If it's real bad, like the burrs on here, I'll start with the 2000. 3000 is basically the roughness of a piece of printer paper. This will get it back. If you're still struggling, put a little bit of Marvel Mystery Oil on it, and it should slide back in. This did not slide in before at all. Now it slides all right. Now, the major thing I have noticed is that this charlatan, this pillock, sorry, I'm watching Top Gear now, these are the fuel tubes. I noticed this one had 2 washers that came right off of it, like they're supposed to. This one, I was curious why these washers don't come off. If you see, it's supposed to be round, like a fuel tube. This one's roundish, but you still can't get the washer off, so it's damaged. Look at that. I don't even know what the hell somebody did with this thing. This is beyond repair, and that sucks. Luckily, very luckily, I was just able to find... Why did I take it down? Anyway, I found a used one for $22 shipped to my house, this little thing. So these things shouldn't be that hard to force together. If you're forcing it, you're making an error. That just step back from it, think about it, go read about your problem. Somebody else has had it before. This has to serve as a warning to not buy somebody else's project for a high price. If it's not running or it says it needs carb work, they may have gone in and fucked it up already. And somebody already got to this before me and fucked it up. Oh, I didn't even notice this one. This is a starter jet, okay? The starter jet only engages when the choke is pulled open, so I don't think it's going to be a huge deal. But you notice anything about this one? Yeah, it's missing the insert, and yeah, it's deformed because somebody must have tried to rip this out. These are press fit in. You don't need to pull these out to clean the carburetor. This carb number 1, is now going to make this motorcycle more difficult to cold start with the choke. That's just what it's going to be. And now we are going to get to the floats, and we're going to measure the float heights, and we want to do the float heights while it's off like this. It's going to be way easier than trying to do it when it's on the plenum. Doing the floats, the first thing we can do is install the float seat with a washer, and this should be a 10 millimeter. You don't have to ream on this thing, just tight enough. It took a lot of pressure to get those out. I'm pretty sure they were chasing a fuel leak before. Anyway, now what we're going to do is get our float valve here, and the float valve has a little spring on the top. It goes up and down, and it's real important. Old ones, old worn out ones, God, I have no accuracy. Old worn out ones may not have as much springiness, and that's going to affect where the floats end up riding. This one has a lot of springiness. The other thing you're looking for is wear marks on this, and I'm not really seeing any wear marks because I don't think this thing has been used before. So if it looks like there's big wear marks on it, it's probably time for it to get replaced. If that spring isn't doing anything, it's probably time for it to get replaced. I always put them with these hoops here pointing forward, like towards the floats. I don't know if that matters, but I'm always consistent in doing that. So I hang that on the tang. The tang's going to be real important when we start to make adjustments. And you just set that in there, and we're going to take the float pin and push it through. So now our floats are hanging. And this is how the carburetor is going to be situated, and they're going to go up and down based on the fuel level in there. So you might want to just, you might think it might be real easy just to take the float height level like this. This is a mistake I made the first time. I thought the spring was totally stiff and it wouldn't matter if it was at this angle. No good. Threw off my whole adjustment the first time. Instead, what you want to do is find that spot where the float just stops moving. So right there. Because if I go all the way to here, I may not see it, but those floats are depressing a little bit still. So I need to take my float height from about here. And I was playing around with this before, and I figured if I line them up on the screw holes there and there, that's a good place to take the reading. And the reading we're taking is from the mating surface on the carb body to the top of the float, just until it starts to push down. There are better ways to do this than with a digital caliper. I know that. You can make purpose-specific gauges that will work better. This worked decent for me. On this specific carburetor, the 1984 VF500F, we are looking for 6.2 millimeters between the surface and the top of that float. I checked my math on, not this carburetor, but the one I built before, shooting for 6.2 in all of them. I filled up all the bowls and I drained it out just to see where I ended up, and I was at 34.5, 34, 35, and then 32 milliliters of fuel in each of them when it was done. Ideally, these would all be the exact same. But it means this method is close, and I'm good enough with this. A gauge will work better, but this is what I've got. So what I would do, and if you're trying to get super accurate and this explanation isn't great, there are tons of great videos out there on how to do this. What I normally do is set it up to about there, and I try to find, get out of here, boy, a spot, the spot, right at where the float is at its peak, and I'll go down and find just where it depresses. Okay, so I think just there. Yep, if I tap, I just move it. 699, and when I was practicing this before this, I kept hitting about 689. So I feel pretty comfortable that's close. All right, so 699 isn't where we want to be. We want to be at 6.2. The further you go down, the more fuel in the bowl. The further you go up, the less fuel. Because you have to think it's situated sort of like this. So the lower that is, the more fuel you're letting in this bowl. So to adjust this, I gotta pop this pin back out. You're gonna pull all the pieces back out. Do that, pull that. There we go. I don't have to pull the valve out, so I just cut that, and I think I'm at 674. So I'm gonna pull this stuff back out. Pull the pin out. Pull the float and the valve out. Now, if I wanted to get higher, I'd push from this side. I want to get a little lower. This is a lot of trial and error. I take a flat screwdriver and I push on this tang. Oof, that might have been much, but we're going to find out. It was too much. 583. So I took too big of a swing. So I'm going to keep pulling that thing off and trying to hit my 6.2 measure. That's how I would measure the floats. Get these all set to 6.2 as close as you can, and obviously I don't want to say subjectivity, but it's just tough to repeat the exact same measurements, but we want 6.2 on all of them. That only took about 15 minutes per carburetor to get the float height set. I don't know, they should be fairly close. All right, so the next thing, before we start reassembling, we want to make sure a couple of these jet pieces are done. These I've polished a bit, these I have not. I would argue against the need to polish the outside of the emulsion tube and the pilot jet. I would argue in favor of polishing the tip of the drain screw, because this is something that was actually plaguing me on my carburetor. I had a knackered up one. They usually end up getting a bunch of crust around them just because that's where all the crap pools around. So what I use to polish this is 3000 grit sandpaper. Again, this is like the consistency of printer paper. It is very much it's not that intrusive. I've never polished an emulsion tube or pilot jet before. I've chosen to try to do it on this one because I know some people do. And because why not? You know, might learn some new things. This is a polished one versus a non-polished one. I feel confident that this will work even without polishing the outside. The big thing though is that the inside needs to be tended to. These have, well, not the emulsion tube. Let's take a look at the pilot. I can barely see through this one, and I know this one's a little bit clogged. You won't see this, but in person you'll see it. What I do to get inside of those is, if this comes out of an ultrasonic cleaner, or let's say you don't have an ultrasonic cleaner, what you can do is spray some carb cleaner into a little container, let these things soak. Okay? People that play guitar will have, what I'm told, an E guitar string, which is going to be better for this. I don't have an E guitar string because I'm not talented. So what I generally do is take this real thin fishing wire through, and I can barely see through this. I can see it's clogged, and I try to fish it through there. If you can't fish it through there, keep putting it in heavier and heavier solvents. Oh, don't be a dick. I practiced this. There it is. All right. So I bring that fishing wire through, and I kind of just try to work out any of that gunk that's inside of this thing. Just try to work out the gunk. See if I can see any better through it. And yeah, I knocked some out. There we go. Okay, that's how it should look. You can't see that, but I can. All right, so let's look at polishing one of these. We're gonna use the fishing wire on these again, but this is one that I've polished. This is one that I have not. If you do not have 3000 grit sandpaper, I wouldn't go with anything less than that. So this is water in here, and I take this and I am going to spin it around the emulsion tube, up and down and all around. I'm not going to worry about the threads too much, because those are just going to get locked in place, and quite frankly, they're not going to affect the way that the bike runs. It's just not. For aesthetics that nobody's ever going to see, you can knock yourself out and go for those. I'm not gonna. All right, so let me wipe this off and see how this looks now compared to this other one. All right, so it's a much prettier looking emulsion tube. Functionally, I think it's going to work roughly the same, but taking off any sharp edges is going to be a good thing, because it's going to make it harder for anything nasty to accumulate, so it's a good idea. Next thing, I'm going to take my safety glasses, and I'm not much one for being a stickler about safety. However, if I don't have my eyes, then I cannot work on motorcycles anymore, and then I might as well kill myself or go grab coronavirus. So, next, two things. Carburetor cleaner and compressed air. By messing with this, by trying to polish the outsides, I just put new deposits inside of there. I have to get rid of them. So, I like to blast some carburetor cleaner through it, and then I like to go with some compressed air. Then on the Pilot, it's going to be more necessary, but make sure you can see through all of those little passages. And on the Pilot, that passage on a 38 Pilot is super, super goddamn tiny. And, well, make sure you can see all the way through it. I brought these other two out because I would not touch these. This is the air fuel mixture screw, and this is the main jet. I wouldn't polish them. Where I could see you wanting to polish this is on here. On this part, this isn't going to do anything for you. And if you saw some crud on here, like if it's big, try to get it off, but I would be afraid of damaging this thing, so I am leaving these alone. I'll shoot it with some carb cleaner, wipe off these areas, but that's about it. Main jet and whatnot, you want to make sure you can see all the way through it, and I'm going to be running guitar string. No, I don't have guitar string. I'm going to be running fishing line through all of those. The drain screw, super important to get this thing cleaned up, because it needs to seat in well. If it doesn't, then it drips a little bit. And that drip is going to drive you insane. Damn, look at that. We're finally at the place where we need some new parts. We're going to start reinstalling some stuff. All right, Pilot is going to go in first. So we're going to take card number 2 here and put in the Pilot. I'll hand screw it in, and then, as I mentioned earlier, I like to find the biggest screwdriver that will fit, so I run less of a risk of cracking the Pilot. You don't have to go nuts on it, but you also want to make sure it's tight enough that it doesn't fall out. And I actually learned something about that. Not a Pilot, but a main jet falling out once when I was driving my K100 when I was trying to fucking troubleshoot the thing. And after pushing it about a mile home, I found out that my main jet fell out. So now I give them a little more snug of a tug than I normally would. Emulsion tube going in now. I'll take this is a 7mm. Give it a little turn. Again, it's brass. You don't have to go that hard. And then the main jet on top of there. And then get the big screwdriver that I know fits and turn it in. Main jets just freak me out now because of that experience. But I guess that's one of those things. All right, what else do we got? Drain screw can go into the float bowl. Drain screw's polished up. The big screwdriver doesn't fit in this one, so I gotta use a smaller one. No, I think... Oh, wait, I had another size. This size does fit. All right, so that's in. And now, this is the float bowl gasket. I am not a fan of anybody putting the sealer around this thing like I encountered earlier. If you have a good gasket, it should work. Preformed gaskets are obviously much nicer. However, on this Billy's Carb kit, I have found this one is not very hard to work with. This one works fine. And I also think that he denotes the Viton ones that are okay to withstand fuel and whatnot are brown, and the other ones that are not made for fuel are black. That is, I'm pretty certain that's true. So I'm just going to start trying to fit this thing in here. And I did the practice one pretty good, which means I'll definitely fuck this one up. If you need to put some grease in or something to hold these things on, use silicone-based grease instead of something like that Valvoline there, which I had been doing in the past. I've learned from the error of my ways. The protein distillates. The petroleum distillates can actually swell the rubber on them and make them, well, not work right. See, that wasn't that hard. You pay a premium for the preformed gaskets. This one fits in there real nice. All right, so this one's actually ready to go. We could plop this one on our clean surfaces. Just gonna push it around and make sure it stays. It does have a dowel pin right there and there. Not really a pin, it's part of it. Now, lastly, I'm putting in new hex stainless steel bolts. The JIS screws have a tendency to strip. Just always something I do is put a tiny little bit, like barely any, but just enough of some anti-seize on there, because it's going to help you when you have to pull it off. But don't glob it on. I barely put any on there. It's more important if you're using the old screws, because there's a very high likelihood that you're going to end up having to pull this thing back off again. That one's all the way down. All the way down. All the way down. All the way down. If this thing leaks, it's because I fucked up putting the gasket in. It's not because I need some kind of fucking sealant. All right, lastly, we need to put in our air fuel mixture screw. That's going in this side right here. Air fuel mixture screw, got a lot of small parts on here. Got the screw itself. Then we're gonna put the spring on. Then we're gonna put the washer on. And then we're gonna put our new O-ring. And if you're having trouble getting this thing over, I recommend using that Marvel Mystery Oil, because it's just always work. Oh, I might need it. Nope, I got it. No, I didn't. Yes, I got it. Okay, I recommend using that Marvel Mystery Oil because it's not going to hurt anything to use that. Don't use anything that could swell these O-rings. All right, so this is going to drop into here. And I need a tiny screwdriver. And it's not going to take much. It is going to bottom out. We want it to bottom out. This is how we're going to set our air fuel mixture screw out. Do not compress this thing in hard. There's no need to drive it in hard. It's going to take a lot of screws. But don't drive it in hard. We're going to get it right to the end. I just hit it. Okay, that's all I'm putting on it. Because when we back this thing out, this is our spot. We're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4 turns out. This is the spot. You don't have to drive it in. You don't want to disform that O-ring we just put in there. In order to reassemble the individual carburetors is to get the slide with the diaphragm and the air cover back on with the needle inside. So I like to clean up the needle a little bit. I just spray onto here because it's soft and I won't damage it. And I just kind of go up and down and clean any of that residue off. You can see I actually got quite a bit off. A lot of that yellow discoloration came off, and this one says 2VL. And if I'm not mistaken, they all say 2VL because I think they're all the exact same. The other thing I would do, same, wet the end of a paper towel all the way up to the end. Do not spray around that diaphragm because they're not going to like solvents. So to clean the slide, I'll spray some on here and clean it up so it moves up and down in there nice and easy, but I want to keep anything off of that diaphragm. So now we got that cleaned up. Take the carburetor, flip it over. I did the same thing with the inside where the slide's going to be moving in. And now we need to put the needle inside. So needle will come through first, and you can just drop the needle through the hole. So now the needle's sticking out. And I like to use a little needle nose pliers instead of using the screwdriver. Grab this, push it down. You'll see 60-degree turn, and it's locked in. So now our needle's there. And they kind of cockeye some of these times, but it will fall in correctly. All right, this I learned from the manual, and it's not obvious, and I've seen a couple videos where this isn't done, and I believe this is the right way to do it. What we want to do is fold this all the way over carefully. There's a little notch here that's going to go over this brass port. That brass port is where we're going to get our vacuum from inside of this. So this may not show well, but I got to get the needle through into the emulsion tube on the bottom. But this wrapping it or folding it down like this is going to be important. There, that's going to work. Okay, so now we got it like that. We're going to move the notch over to there. If I just drop this all the way down, you see how that lip is going to start folding up. If I try to put the cover over the top of it now, it's a good chance I'm going to pinch it. So I'm actually going to leave my finger under it. I'm going to bring it back up, fold it back down, and then I kind of support the slide down here. You barely just bring the bottom of the slide even with your finger so it doesn't drop, and move, position the diaphragm all the way to the outside. If you have to lift it up, raise it down, drop it down a little bit, you just want to find this spot. So when we put the cover on, we're not going to pinch any of that diaphragm. And this is where I want it right here. Make sure that's here. There's going to be a little notch on one side of the cover. Right there. That's the tiny little port that our vacuum is going to drive through. It'll sit like that. Alright, so now the last thing is I need this spring. There is a spot that spring's going to fit in. And I might get, yep, I got it. Okay. Bring that down. Right there. Alright. 2 screws. Bolts, screws. I can never figure out if it's a bolt or a screw. Tight. Okay. Now that's in there. We should see that the slide moves up and slowly down. Up, slowly down. Up, slowly down. Then if I blow into this spot, which this will have air moving past it, and as you have more air moving past it, it's going to draw more of a vacuum up top. So if I blow into it, you can see that it brings the slide up. We know that the slide is working all right. It looks like I'm jumping ahead. It's because I got ahead of myself and started reassembling the thing and forgot to put the goddamn choke pieces back in. So I'm going to take the plunger from the choke. I put a little bit of this O-ring, silicone O-ring grease on it, like the thinnest little bit, just so it moves in there good. Alright, so now I need, my spring is going to go over the top, and then this 14mm plastic piece is going to come down onto here. Barely got to tighten this thing, just so it doesn't spin off. And because I'll forget, I forgot to do this one. There. A little bit. Okay, you won't move. Alright, so that one's good. Now, we need this piece. Again, I'm just doing a little bit of this on the inside of the jacket, like there's barely any there. But it's kind of like a tacky kind of thing, and I think it's going to help me out. Doesn't say to do it, but it's what I'm doing. So, spring, this is kind of a tricky part. The only tricky part of doing this is that this kind of, you gotta push the spring all the way up there. Sorry, you gotta put the back through, and then you gotta push the spring all the way up there. You gotta bring that there. That was a tricky bit. Alright, jacket goes around all the way up. Once it's straight, it'll be easier. There. Okay. Then this piece, line this up the same way. Make sure I got it. It goes down like that. The old, nope, that way. That one's taller. All right, the old one had a lock wash and a nut. Billy's kit comes with a nylon nut on it, so I don't need the lock wash. It's 7mm. I'll put that on there. Now, the choke operates. That was really stupid of me, so don't forget to do that. All right, so now it's time to get some of our new O-rings on here. And so this is some of the stuff from the Billy's kit. We've got the, what do we got there? The S tubes, Z tubes, and the vent pipes. These are the old ones. Pulled these off. Actually shot one of them across the room because they're pretty nasty. I do have the new Z pipe. This is the old one. I have a new Z pipe. It's this one, and this one came in the mail for 22 bucks used. And well, it's not totally round because that's not a circle. That's an oval, but it fits. So that's what we're going to make work. So I'll get the black ones onto the vent tubes, onto the outsides there, onto the S pipes. These thicker ones on this Billy's kit, the thicker ones, S tube, or the thicker, Z tube are the thinner. They look very, very, very similar. Wow, I just switched these two around. I can see that now. Okay, so the S tube ones will go over on the side like that. The Z tube, this is the most important one I think there is on the entire bike, because I've screwed this, when I was putting mine together, I screwed this up several times. What I would do, get a little of the O-ring silicone lubricant on there, here, and make sure you're using a silicone-based lubricant. And this one caused me all kinds of headaches when I first put mine together, because I had to take it apart 3 times because this thing kept leaking. It's a hex, so it's only going to fit in one way. If you see how it's hex like that. Now, I'm going to push it together like that. That's not good enough. It needs to go all the way together. That one clicked. That one clicked nice. This part is the most important to me. So those two will go on there. These will go on there. And then these will go on there. I will get all of those on, and then we're ready to start putting this thing back together. Alright, so I've got the S-pipe in here, little silicone O-ring grease on there. Pro tip, don't drink a bunch of coffee before this like I did, because you need some steady hands. And you need to do it up like that, push the S in. There we go. Now I should be able to get a washer over, hopefully. And then these little pins are way nicer than the original wires that came on these cotter pins. It will be useful to have a nice little needle nose like that. Okay, there we go. Those will sit like so. Now we need to get Z-pipe, goes into here. We need a vent tube here. You can spin that out of the way. You can reposition it later. Then need the Z on the bottom. Might have to move the Z around. There. And vent up top. And are those in the right spots? Yeah. Oh, no. Need to come up. Okay. There. Like so. Now, this one. There. S tube. Got it there. And here. Okay. Make sure this is under. Okay. That's roughly. Why is that cockeyed? There we go. That's looking better. Okay. That's how it should look. The next thing we have to do is get choke linkages on. You want to make sure this thing always looked a little crooked to me, and it like it's a forward slash just a little bit. So when you push it together, that's as good as I've gotten the other one, and it wasn't leaking. Eventually this is going to sit on here over the top and lock these things in like so. So they won't move. It'll be rigid on there. But for now, it's a weebly wobbly thing. The next thing are the choke linkages. I've cleaned up the ends of these so they weren't as nasty with some 3000 grit sandpaper, and these are going to link our linkages like so, like that, and then the trickiest little bitch is going to be this guy, kind of sitting in there like that. It's going to link those two. And over here, we're going to put these on with new washers and then lock them in with these nice little cotter pins under. So I'm going to get those on, and then we'll get closer. So now we have our linkages on, 1, 2, and 3. If I push them together, you can see they will move the choke plungers. Then I'm getting these new plenum O-rings in, and our gaskets, I guess, or big ass O-rings. I just put a little bit of this stuff on them, not because these particularly need it, but it helps them stay in place, and it'll go in pretty good. There we are. I've also put in a couple of these dowels. I think it might come with 8. I put mine together with 2 because that's all I found, and I found some more. I forgot to put these in a bath of Evapo-Rust to get rid of that rust, but whatever, it is what it is. So I think I should have 2 thrust screws, or springs. Those I put in those after the thing's on the plenum, and I can flip it upside down and it's rigid. And there's 2 sink screws that, again, I'm also going to put those in after the plenum is on. So I need to get this thing aligned and on here. So let me give that some thought, and then I'll do it. Yeah, I'll just play with it and we'll fast forward this part. Okay. Okay, got it on. I actually used all the dowel pins. You may notice I didn't use these things here. I think these original ones had hexes on them, and I think they'd bend over to kind of lock them in place. It's not going to do anything for these, so I didn't use them, but I always keep the old parts because you never know. And make sure you label them, because when you come back to them in a couple of years, you want to know what they are, and you'll forget, I promise. So, this is it. I don't know what this bullshit is. God damn it. Now we can see, we can move this thing all around, and it's nice and sturdy, unlike before. Look at that. Got our choke linkages all moving good. I need to spin. Oh boy, what have I done? Ah, I totally forgot! Those have to go through! Fuck! Okay, we're almost there. We've got 4 springs we need to get in. 2 thrust springs and 2 sink screw springs. What I've done is I've backed this sink screw all the way out so that there's more travel here, so that it will be easier to get this one in. That one's going there. This one is going under here. Gonna have to fight it into there, into that spot. Then the thrust springs. This one doesn't look like it. It's gonna fit all the way in there. It'll fit in there. And this one, the bigger one, it's gonna fit in here. That one will be easy. I'm gonna do the sink screws first, and then I'm gonna do the thrust screws. Springs. They're springs. I want to figure that out before we put it on the bike, so I will get an auxiliary tank, hook it up to there, drop fuel into it, and we will see if it leaks or not. If it does, plenum comes back off, break the whole thing apart, redo the tubes, and hopefully it'll hold fuel the next time. It took me about 4 tries the first time. I'm real disheartened because I noticed something that really sucks, because I'm never going to get this one to run right, because it is missing one part. The one part I am missing is going to throw this whole damn thing off, and I think it was a casualty of receiving this carburetor in loose parts wrapped up in paper towel. And the thing I'm missing is inside of here. This one has it. Well, this one doesn't need it. There should be a nylon bushing inside of this linkage here. I have a nylon washer, but I don't have a nylon bushing. What that does is, when I see how there's that play right there, doesn't seem like much, that will make this bike impossible to synchronize. If you see, we're going to be closed up top, start to open, but 1 and 3, 2 and 4 are not going to be opening when 1 and 3 are, to hold fuel. But that little bit is going to keep this motorcycle from being able to, 1, idle correctly, and 2, accelerate correctly. God fucking damn it. I've looked everywhere for that thing. I knew I was missing it. I still wanted to see how it would look without it, and what I'm seeing is that it's not going to work without that nylon bushing in there, and that's just disheartening. Ready for truth time? I'm going to put some fuel to it. I don't even know if I want it to hold fuel. I don't know which I'll be more disappointed with, but let's find out. If it's going to leak, it's going to leak from that Z pipe or one of the S pipes. Might take a minute. Can hear it bubbling through. It's working. We are not leaking, which makes it that much more disheartening that I'm gonna have to pull the whole fucking thing back together. If I had that nylon washer or bushing, this would be done and it would be ready to go back onto a motorcycle. But I am far from done, but this video is done, so if you made it this far, thanks for watching. Postscript. Me and Mark have figured out that you can pull the throttle linkage off without disassembling the carburetor. That is exciting, because then I can get nylon bushing or plastic bushing or whatever the hell it is I need, something like that, onto there without breaking this thing apart again. Now I'm happy.